we'd like to take a few minutes for a talk, panel, and then we'll enable you to ask several questions. And in 15 minutes, we'll take a break, a lunch break for you. Did I miss someone? Danny is here. Rami is here. Where? Okay. So we heard different point of view. Some things were very optimistic. Some things were very pessimistic. Some things showed us that we're in a very good position, and some things showed that we are at risk. And I'd like to ask you, where do you think we are going to from here? And if we arrange this symposia in 3 years, where would we be? What would you all say if 3 years from now, I would ask you what is going on? Would you say the same? Do you think the situation will be better or worse? And I'd like to ask Professor Bourguignon to start, please. Yeah, you're our guest.
Okay, I guess the prime is to know, to answer your question, where. What we just heard is not extremely encouraging and means that there is a lot of effort to be made in this country to overcome some of the difficulties which are coming from the heterogeneity of the population, in particular, this heterogeneity in terms of education, schooling, and all the implications that this may have. So I get that the conclusion from that point of view is that very serious efforts have to be made, but as in many other countries, this involves more than economic efforts. This basically involves changes in the way the society works. It involves a change in the balance between various groups in the society, and it's not clear how you do that, and I'm not convinced that economists have a clear answer to that question. No, unfortunately, I'm not sure that economists have any magic at their disposal. So this is, I think, what I could say on the Israeli experience. I mean, I enjoyed very, very much both presentations by Mr. Ben David and Mr. Eckstein. They were very, very illuminating and showing the challenge in front of the Israeli economy. Now, I would like to say maybe a few words about the presentation on the food security, which is maybe much more encouraging, because this is where you can see that progress is possible. And again, Israel has been, or is being, very important, influential in promoting this change in agricultural technology and in yields. What I would like to say about this is the following. As a matter of fact, I was in the bank, and I was a little behind this World Development Report that you mentioned on agriculture. And for a very long time, the development community thought that agriculture was not that important. Basically because the model they had in mind was the model of developed countries. I mean, the history of the economic history of developed countries, saying that in any case, agriculture would, the weight of agriculture in GDP would go down, in employment would go down, and that poverty would be eliminated by simply farmers migrating toward the cities and being employed in manufacturing or later on in services. Now, what we observe is that this model is basically not working. this model is not anymore the model that we can apply to the countries which were shown on the various maps that we have seen. And because of that, it is absolutely essential to do something for subsistence farmers because we cannot live on the view that at some stage they will leave their farm and they will all go to live happily in nice places in the city. So what has been shown is extremely important. At the same time, it is true that one of the big issues is how to take most advantage of those new technologies. And I was very much interested by what you said about the fact that I think it was the example of Senegal, where you had to do some regrouping of farmers in order to apply the technology that you were mentioning. And this is a difficult thing to do because farmers very often are isolated. They don't necessarily like to work in group. So again, this involves more than economics, this involves more than technology, this involves changing the mind of the people, changing the way in which people do behave. So I guess that my conclusion would be, I think that as economists we have the right diagnostic about what is going on. Very often we have the right view about the policies that should be implemented, but most often the obstacles in front of us are political obstacles, and our difficulty very often is to convince societies, politicians, and opinion makers in societies about the direction in which they should go.
I am an optimistic person on my nature, and I would like to say a few things about the trends and the policies. So what we will see depends very much about what would be done. If I look at the numbers, I think we have done a tremendous success relatively in terms of employment. I mean, we are reaching now on age 25 to 65, on average, 76% employment, which is much above France, much above Italy, much above Spain. It's actually reaching, and we can do, if we continue the existing policies, I would predict that in the direction I put to the government, we reach already what I put in a committee that I added in 2010, the rates that we put as targets, and the government adopted the target and initiated policies for these targets. We already reached the 2020 rates of employment. The point is that productivity has not been growing, etc. But that, I think, shows that the government can do when they put rates. If we will increase the rates and we continue the existing policies on enhancing employment, and given what we have seen, I just give a number, Haredi female actually working now about 73% on age 25 to 64. There is a huge change in the Haredi environment, and there is a huge change among Arab women. The rate of completion of high school among them has been reached dramatically, etc. So I think, given what we have seen in the last years and the fact that unemployment went down now to 4.9% with the new measures, tell us that if the government take actions, they can reach higher. Now, the government should take huge actions on improving productivity. If the government takes it, we will be on a positive rate, although we will continue to have basic issues because we are a country where people love children more. Even forget about the ultra-Orthodox. I say even the other people. We enjoy having children and raise children. And that makes, in terms of requirements for investment in children and education more than others, and we don't do good enough, as David showed and so forth. And if we will invest there more, and I think we could really do better. I don't predict that we are going to close the gap with the US or with Western countries on productivity. Those issues are deeper, and I would say even as an economist, which we study, we don't really have a full answer, because it's not only human capital, it has to do with a lot of other aspects in productivity. And the dual aspect of the economy between the high tech and the rest, I think will exist there and will continue to exist there, and it's going to hunt us, and we will have to find out to deal with it. I would say one more aspect that has not been discussed about income distribution. One of the worst things that has happened in the last 6 years is the housing sector. What has happened in the housing sector has increased inequality in Israel, which is not measured in any of the graphs we showed you, more than anything else. This is disastrous to a high income inequality economy. The fact that housing prices now per square meter is among the highest, not only relative to wages, even in absolute level in the whole Western world, and certainly relative to income, that we are about 30% lower than them, is a disastrous to income inequality, and it is going to build a huge additional inequality in wealth problem that will hunt us in the next future. The other thing, which I think the challenge that we haven't discussed, is the robotic. Since we are very high-tech oriented, and since a lot of robotic is developed actually in this country, including car robotics, this challenge of skill bias technical change, which is more in Israel hunting our labor market, as I tried to indicate, than almost any country there, it will be even more a problem for Israel in the next 20 years. And therefore, I would say the following. We can deal with these issues. Unfortunately, the government is not being too decisive on dealing with these important issues. And if they will not, then we will face even more problem, I think, in the future, although we can solve probably some of the problems.
Last week we had a marvelous lecture by from our faculty about the growth in population, and I think it would relate a lot to what you just told us. Also, we had another lecture here by Gershon, who works with robotics and trying to increase it. I wish they could be here with us now. What do you think?
If you ask me about the future of smallholder farmers, I'm naturally optimistic, but I can't base it on any good evidence. When you spend time in the field, you are exposed to many, many frustrating experiences, but sometimes also to very promising experiences. But what I am very optimistic about is Israeli society involvement in this challenge. I said before that it's been declining over the years, but in recent years there is some kind of a resurgence, and especially in civil society, you see more and more young people getting excited about international development. And the fact that this is now coming up in academia, I think, is also a reflection of that. I can tell you that more students are coming, amazing students. Some of them are here in the room. They're getting involved in this kind of work, and they're doing very, very good work. And I think this mentality of, we have enough problems of our own, is still very strong, but I think there's a change. And I think every year more and more people are getting involved. And by the way, it's not just about NGOs and government, it's also about private sector. Becoming more interested in trying to penetrate these emerging markets. For profit, and that's fine. I think so. There's more and more energy in this endeavor, and I think we'll see more and more Israel being able to offer in this regard. Not in terms of resources, because frankly, the official development assistance budget of Israel is embarrassing frankly. But like in other fields, sometimes we can make up with human capital what we can't do with resources or refuse to do with resources. And I think really there are amazing people here, and many of them from previous generations who have, done a lot. Amazing agronomists, amazing people who have toured Africa trying to do this, and now a younger generation is coming up. So that makes me very optimistic about that.
I don't know whether to, in general I'm an optimist, but here there are huge questions. I mean, we can get things right and we can blow it. I think primarily everything that I showed is an issue of national priorities at the national level. Where we used to, how we used to behave and how we behave today. I agree with Professor Eckstein in the sense that it's not all education, clearly not, but it is a necessary condition, even if not sufficient condition. We don't invest sufficiently elsewhere either. If you look at one of the other primary determinants of productivity and inequality, it's our transportation infrastructure. And if you look at the congestion on our roads, 45 years ago, it was identical to small European countries. Today, it's over 3 times the congestion of those same small European countries. We simply forgot to build roads and rail where most of the people live. We've never been on the map as far as rail is concerned. There have been improvements in both of these areas in recent years, but they're a drop in the bucket compared to where we need to go, and even compared to the improvements in the European countries during the same decade that we've seen the improvements here. They're still small compared to what these countries have done. If you look at another infrastructure, bureaucratic infrastructure, here we're very adept at putting all kinds of barriers on basically opening a business, running a business, and operating it. Here too, it's going to affect productivity, it's going to affect inequality and poverty. We do things in every one of the areas that we need to, but it's all an issue of degree. We don't do enough in most of the areas that we should, and we do too much in areas that we shouldn't be near, as far as our public expenditures are concerned. And we need to regroup and reorganize in that regard. Whether I'm an optimist, I believe in the Israeli people, a little bit less in the kind of governance we've been seeing in recent years, but that's a whole different issue.
Yes, I wanted to add a remark on inequality, because the chart which was shown on the Gini coefficient showed that indeed inequality increased very much in Israel, as it increased very, very much in the United States. I don't think that we can consider that inequality can increase independently from some problems in the society. It is not necessarily conflictual. I mean, it is not necessarily the case that because inequality is increasing, there will be some social movements. It may be the case that some populist politician will gain a lot of influence, and then very bad decisions will be taken because of that, but we cannot consider that inequality may increase without consequences on the way in which the society is functioning. We have seen that in many countries. We have seen that in Latin America, where definitely populist regimes, not to mention in the earlier days dictatorships, were linked to the issue of inequality. We cannot forget the fact that what we observe today in the United States is completely linked to the increase in inequalities which took place over the last 25 years. And we hear things today there which we would not have imagined 10 or 15 years ago, and this is related. So in the case of Israel, I think that this big increase in inequality is something of a real concern. And if we add on that what Professor Eckstein just said about robotics, about the impact of technical change, about the impact of artificial intelligence on employment, it may be the case that there are still forces independently from the way in which the Israeli society is functioning that will still add to inequality. So because of that, I think it must be a priority of governments and the civil society and the public debate in this country, as in many other countries where we have seen an increase in inequality.
Just a comment following up. I think it's important to point out. The question, I want to say there is one graph that Dan shows from the finance ministry about this prediction that we are going to a huge deficit. I know this study, I don't accept the assumption, therefore I don't accept the conclusion. But the other thing I want to emphasize, I think inequality is a real problem, mainly not because of the fact that it's just inequality, it's a question how much we take care of the poor and how we deal with the lower 20% and how we give them the free opportunities and the hope. And that, I think, is also very important. Because look at the US, it's the conditional on its population growth is the highest unequal country in the world. But it's the country that most of the people who want to migrate from their country want to go there, especially from this country, but not only. So being an unequal country doesn't mean that people don't want to live there. And that per se, and I think the key fact is really don't kill the dreams of the poor people and the mobility. And I think the key fact is very important. It's not just the current inequality, is really the potential mobility, especially the potential mobility of those who came from nowhere, which I guess a lot of us here, including I would say me.
Okay, thank you. That means two main things. First, you led us directly to what will be after the break and the second symposium talking about challenges and what we should do and how we change things. And the other thing is that I have the feeling that we just started and we could take the whole week to talk about poverty, and it's only the beginning. So thank you all. We will take half an hour break now. You have refreshment outside. Thank you to all.